My name is Elizabeth Perry. I'm the Advocacy and Communication Manager of the Anglican Alliance, which exists to connect, equip, and inspire the worldwide Anglican family to work for a world free of poverty and injustice and to safeguard creation. Creation care is at the heart of our identity as Anglicans, expressed in the fifth mark of Anglican mission, which is to strive to safeguard the integrity of creation and sustain and renew the life of the earth. It's no exaggeration to say that the integrity of creation is under threat and at risk of collapse. The life systems of the earth are under severe strain from the triple crises of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Earlier this year, UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres gave a stark assessment, saying, "Humanity is waging war on nature. This is senseless and suicidal. The consequences of our recklessness are already apparent in human suffering, towering economic losses, and the accelerating erosion of life on Earth." Amidst the ongoing tragedy of the COVID-19 pandemic, the news cycle this year has been punctuated by stories of cataclysmic weather events. Extreme heat, wildfires, and floods have devastated communities and environments across the world. The reality of climate change is inescapable. As the Anglican Alliance, we get to see what's happening across the whole of the Anglican Communion. We see the devastating impacts of both sudden onset and slow onset disasters. In the Pacific, rising sea levels are forcing whole communities to relocate, endeavours in which the Anglican Church is involved. In Canada, wildfires this year have devastated Indigenous Anglican communities. Small island states everywhere are particularly vulnerable to increasingly extreme tropical storms. The Archbishop of the West Indies, Howard Gregory, says the number of Category 4 and 5 hurricanes in his region have increased over 50% in the last 20 years, and talks about their devastating cost in terms of lives and livelihoods. Small island states have been described as the proverbial canaries in the coal mine when it comes to climate change. All this has impacts on mental well-being too, especially on young people. But Anglicans aren't just impacted, they're also responding in myriad ways, as the Troubled Waters reflection illustrated. In particular, churches are often first responders in a disaster, acting sacrificially to welcome and care for those affected. Since they're part of the local community, the local church and its members can act fast, responding from their own resources before outside agencies arrive. And because they're integral parts of their communities, churches are there before, during, and long after other agencies have left. As the Anglican Alliance, one of our roles is to connect across the communion in the aftermath of disasters. As the number of climate-related disasters has increased in recent years, the importance of preparing for disasters and building resilience has become ever more apparent. One way we're helping to do that is through the resilience course mentioned in the video. We're also building a network of accompaniers. These are people who are resourced to work and walk alongside churches in times of disaster, providing support and encouragement. At the end of October and beginning of November, COP26 will take place in Glasgow. COP26 stands for the 26th Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC. The UNFCCC is the preeminent global decision-making process to tackle climate change. Pretty much every country in the world is part of the negotiations. The COP is not the only global or UN forum for climate negotiations, so this is not the only opportunity we have for advocacy and influencing, but it is an extremely important one. Why? Back in 2015, COP21 led to the historic Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was a game changer. It wasn't perfect, but it was the moment when the world finally, as a whole, came together on climate change and agreed to take the measures necessary to keep global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. A lot has happened since then. Businesses and cities are rising to the challenge of creating a more sustainable future. Renewable forms of energy production have increased and the costs fallen dramatically. Individuals, communities, and churches are taking action. There is a lot to celebrate, but not enough is happening. At the moment, as a world, we are not doing nearly enough to address the enormity of the crisis we're facing. In the Paris Agreement, there is a scheduled milestone every 5 years when each country is supposed to significantly increase their commitment to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions or nationally determined contributions. COP26 is the first of these scheduled milestones, and it is therefore an important moment for ratcheting up of ambition and action. That's a key reason why there will be so much media coverage of the COP and why so many people will be watching what happens and trying to influence the outcome. There are other reasons it's important too. Other key goals of COP26 are to encourage countries to adapt to protect communities and natural habitats, to mobilize $100 billion in climate finance per year from developed countries, and to work together across the private sector, civil society, member states, and other partners to rise to the challenges presented by the climate crisis. The Anglican Communion, or more accurately in this case, the Anglican Consultative Council, has recently gained accreditation as an observer NGO to the UNFCCC. There has been Anglican presence at previous COPs, but accreditation means that for the first time, the Anglican Communion as a whole can participate in this decision-making space. And it provides opportunities which just haven't been there before. These include making formal written submissions and having an Anglican Communion delegation to attend the COP, which can hold meetings with government delegations. It means we can be in the room and bring the voices and experiences of Anglicans across the Communion into this preeminent global decision-making space. This is a significant opportunity, and the ACC COP26 working group is working hard to make the most of it. We will be sending a small delegation which prioritizes youth and Indigenous voices, and we're finalizing our policy paper, which has resilience and just financing as priority focus areas. But all of us need to take action. This is a time to speak out, take action, and advocate for change. Climate change is an existential threat for millions of people and for myriad species and habitats. It must break God's heart. Both science and faith tell us we are deeply interconnected. The COVID-19 pandemic has screamed this truth at us. The time for seeing ourselves as separate from one another or from the natural world is past. The science tells us urgent action is needed now and at scale. Science and experience tell us this is possible. Do we have the faith to act? Please pray for the Anglican Communion's delegation, and please pray for our brothers and sisters across the world who are on the front line of the climate emergency. What else can we be doing as individuals and churches to engage with the fifth mark of mission? Gus Speth has said, I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. But the church does. Spiritual and cultural transformation is what the church is supposed to be all about. As I've reflected on this, I feel that what we need more than anything is a heart or mind level change, to change the way we see the world and relate to it in our deepest being. Many people, especially in the West, have an extractive worldview, one where we use the world and we take from it. It's particularly prevalent in societies whose wealth is derived from an economy based on extraction and exploitation. But there are other worldviews, including within the Anglican Communion. Indigenous Christians across the Communion share a worldview that's about relationship. So, Indigenous Maori and Pacific peoples understand creation as inherently unified, with a profound interconnection amongst everything that exists. Plants, animals, rivers, hills, all have intrinsic value and are to be respected. Human beings are positioned in creation, not as supreme masters over the earth community, but as interdependent members of the earth community. This understanding, they say, requires us to broaden our gaze beyond our anthropocentric concerns, to include consideration of all living entities in everything we do. This relational worldview is shared by other Indigenous Anglicans in Africa, the Amazon, and the Arctic. Kinship and connection with God's good earth, discerning, protecting, and joining in creation's song of praise, and hearing her groans are deeply biblical ideas. I think we need so very much to turn away from or repent of a mentality of extraction and embrace one of relationship for the sake of God's good earth and our brothers and sisters across the world. Only when we love the world wholeheartedly as God does, only when we treasure it and understand our place in it and know our profound interconnectedness with all its creatures and understand our dependence on its bounty, only then will we care enough to safeguard the integrity of creation and sustain and renew the life of the earth, the fifth Anglican mark of mission. And to love it, we have to know it. We need to connect and reconnect with our world over and over. We need to marvel at its wonders and the sheer miracle of it all. As the poet Mary Oliver has written, the multiplicity of forms, the hummingbird, the fox, the raven, the sparrowhawk, the otter, the dragonfly, the water lily, and so on and on. It must be a great disappointment to God if we are not dazzled at least 10 times a day.